back to my channel. My name is Jason, and this is From Sin's Perspective Reviews. So, I know it's been a while. I've moved over the last month. It's actually been a couple of months, so it's been an arduous process, yada yada yada. But I moved and I'm somewhat settled, so we'll figure this thing out. Okay, anyway, so as the title states, I'm just going to give my opinion on the Miss Fisher's modern murder mysteries. Now, as a person who's a fan of the original with Essie Davis, I really didn't go into this with high hopes. And the reason is because I really don't like remakes. It's good that they're not like recasting for the same role, which I don't know what my thoughts were going into this, but I really didn't have high hopes going into it. I have to admit that I only watched the first episode, and I actually sat down and watched half of the first episode, and the rest of the episode was kind of playing in the background while I was getting other stuff done. So it was just okay. So for people who haven't seen the original, if you haven't seen the original, I would suggest that you go either to Acorn TV, which I have a subscription, and sorry, it's 9 o'clock. I need to go to bed because I have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go to work. But I have a subscription to Acorn TV, but it only has the first 2 seasons. If you go to Netflix, it actually has 3 seasons. So I would say watch the original first before you go and watch the modern, up-to-date version. Okay, so in the modern version, in the original version, Fine Fisher is a woman who was basically ahead of her time. She was not about the married life. She was not about the baby life. She was about experiencing life and all that life had to offer. You know, she was well traveled. She was cultured. She was fashionable. The original takes place in the 1930s. The modern takes place in the 1960s. So you have a 30-year difference. And she just had maturity about her, you know, like somebody who's lived and who had experienced a lot. And as a result, she was very confident and very self-assured, and she was very much a woman who knew her own mind and excuse me, I don't know, my throat's dry. She knew what she wanted, and she knew her powers. The way that she used her feminine wiles to get what she wanted was amazing. But you know, she was very much, even in her approach to cases, she was always very feminine, very ladylike. She was very much a woman who was just very comfortable in her skin, and she knew her worth and what she had to offer. And then you had Jack, who was the detective inspector, and then you had Hugh, who was just under him, and then you had Dottie, who was Fine's companion. And then you had Mr. Butler, who was a butler. You had Aunt Prudence, who was Fine's aunt on her mother's side, and then you had Bert, and I forget the other guy's name, who were kind of her, they were her like streetwise guys who kind of, they knew their way around. And so all of these characters came together to make what I think is a great show. I love the show. And so when I saw the modern murder mysteries, I was like, I don't really know what to expect. But like I said, I sat through the first show, and so the first show is basically, it's 30 years later, it's in the 60s, and Fine Fisher, who established what they call the Adventuress Club. And the Adventuress Club is basically a group of women who have basically achieved amazing things. And when you think about the time in which they lived, the 60s, the 30s through the 60s, which would have been her time, there were very rigid roles for what women were supposed to be and what women are supposed to do and what women should be allowed to do and say and behave. And so this group of women were with just women who kind of buck that system and kind of cut their own path in different fields, different areas. And so they have this one guy who works there, and I guess he's like their footman. He like does like admin work. I mean, I don't really, like I said, I only watched the first episode. So they had to explain some things away in the beginning, because if you watch the original, then you would know that one of the larger issues in the series of the original was that Fine was always she always felt guilty about her sister's death. Now, she was the oldest, and so they had gone to fair. And they were children. She was probably like, I don't know, 10. I don't know, probably not even that old. And so her, of course, her little sister tagged along. And so she got distracted, and her little sister wandered off, and she never saw her again. And it was suggested that this guy who was convicted of abducting and murdering another child was responsible for abducting her sister and murdering her sister, even though they never found her body. And so a lot of the show was basically her guilt about that happening, basically on her watch. And so when we get to the new series, of course, they had to explain how, because initially I was thinking maybe this was her daughter, because in the end of the third season, her and Jack finally got together. Now, like I said, there are a lot of twists and turns, so go and watch the series. But something, okay, maybe that's her daughter. But then when I watched it, and they said that's her niece. I'm like, how'd she have a niece? And the only sibling she had died when they were kids. So of course, they had to explain that. They're saying her father told her when he was on his deathbed that he had fathered another child. And she had another sister out there somewhere. And they're saying that she never really had a relationship with the sister, which means she never had a relationship with the niece. Okay, so they've never met. So Fine is now missing. They don't know what happened to her. They know her plane maybe possibly gone down over New Guinea. And so her only surviving relative is Peregrine Fisher. Okay, now Peregrine Fisher is this young girl in her 20s who's kind of like flip-flopping through life. She don't really know what she wants to do. She's hopping from job to job. She's hunching her boyfriend in the backseat of his car. She's doing what young girls do when they don't have shit else to do, really. Just life is passing her by. And so she gets fired from her last job, and she heads home, and obviously there's this letter in the mail saying, oh, well, you're telling her about her aunt and how she is the sole beneficiary of her aunt's estate. And her aunt, Fine, was always a wealthy woman. So she inherited all this money. She went from being a pauper, basically, to inheriting all this money, this mansion, this huge house, this gorgeous house, this fabulous car, this fabulous wardrobe. I mean, she just went from basically from pauper to a princess, right? And so one of her duties is trying to find her way, how she fits into this adventurous club. Because Fine, of course, if you watch the original, she has large shoes to fill. And so her not really knowing what she wants to do, she decides, you know what, I'll try my hand at being a private investigator. And they basically have to tell her, like, this wasn't a hobby for your aunt. This was something that she took very seriously. And this is something that was important to her, along with other things. And so lo and behold, of course, a death happens. And actually two deaths happen in the first episode. And now you have Peregrine, and I can't remember the guy's name who plays the cop, the younger cop. So you can see that they're going to kind of have this relationship where that Fine had with Jack. But I don't know if it's going to drag out as long as it did in the original. The thing is, in the original, even though it kind of dragged out, you kind of knew where it was heading, even though it spanned the course of 3 seasons. It was still entertaining. They always kept you like, okay, when are they actually going to actually get together? Okay, so I don't know. I'm not sure if they're going to do that, string it out that long in this show, because it seemed like she was ready to do, before her boyfriend that she was hunching early in the episode, he pops up, and now he's, shows up to this. Now she has this big house and all this money in his car, and so he's going to be like the Hound Hog, right? So it's different. I wish that they would have either brought back the original, because I want to know what happened to Fran and Jack. You know, what's going on with Hugh and Dottie. Now, I don't know if they're going to introduce any of the characters from the original original show in this season, because they would still be alive. I mean, with the exception of Aunt Prudence, who was elderly. And so, I mean, I don't think she would have made it another 30 years. And, you know, Mr. Butler, maybe. But for the rest of them, I'm thinking they would still be alive, and at the very least, it's 30 years. So you would assume that Dottie and Hugh would have adult children at this point. So, like I said, I don't know if they're going to be introduced at some point throughout the season. But like I said, I wish they would have either brought back the original. They would have kept the original cast, but introduced the younger people, because at this point it's 30 years later. So, of course, they would all be a lot older. And, of course, she'd be too old to be scaling buildings and some of the shenanigans that she got into, some of them, you know, but, and of course, at this point, Jack would have been retired. Hugh would have been creeping towards retirement. Like I said, 30 years, they would have had adult children. So I wish they either would have, you know, brought back the original cast and then brought the younger cast in, or they would have just let this show cut its own path and not kind of piggyback on the Miss Fisher, the original show. So I'm not exactly sure. I'll watch a few more episodes and then make a decision on how I feel about how this is all going to work out. But yeah, it was very different. It wasn't what I expected. So, like I said, it's after 9. I gotta get up early to go to work. So I'm going to end this here, and I will talk to you guys later.